this episode, we get an officer's view of Ferguson, police militarization, get sprayed in the face with pepper spray by our friends, fight the war on drugs, and discuss tactical man boobs. You are back in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Roving Horde, it is good to be back. My, how we have missed y'all. And for our first episode back of Season 4, we have a very good one for you. But a quick warning before we start, there is a special message at the end of the show, so make sure you listen all the way through. Our guest has a challenge for you. With that, let's welcome author, Marine, police officer, Texas National Guard Reservist, and all-around interesting guy, Chris Hernandez. Chris, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, you and I met during a Death Valley Magazine Mobile Scout training, which was really interesting, and we got to talk a little bit. And you have a rather extensive service record, man. Tell us what all you've done and what you do now. And
I guess I've done one or two things. I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps Reserve. I joined when I was 17 years old. When I was a senior in high school, and a couple of weeks after graduation, I was in basic training. My 18th birthday, I was throwing hand grenades. I think that's something I always like to say because I think it just sounds cool.
Mm-hmm.
But then I spent the next 6 years in the Marine Reserve and really didn't do anything. My unit was mobilized for Desert Storm, and we were mobilized the day the war ended and didn't get sent overseas. While I was in the Marine Reserve and after Desert Storm, I decided, well, I'll go to school. Went to community college for a couple of years. Didn't find that really interesting and decided to become a cop. So I went through a regional police academy, went to work for a couple of very small police departments in Southeast Texas. The first one I was at had 10 officers. I was there for less than a year, and I went to a department with 23 officers and was there for 3 years, and then went to a big city. And I don't say what agency I work for, because I'm not spokesman for my agency. But I went there, and I've been there at that agency now for 17 years. So I have 20 years total as a cop. I also did a year and a half as a United Nations police officer in Kosovo, which most people think is a military thing. It's not. It's a civilian position. When I was in Kosovo, I was working with the locals. I was living out on the civilian economy. I was a civilian cop. Basically, I was Kosovo PD. Simultaneously, as I've been a cop, when I finished up my Marine Reserve time, I went into the Army National Guard. I was a tank crewman for 9 years. Then I went to Iraq in 2005. I went over there as a tank crewman, never got in a tank. I was in Humvee on convoy escort team, so I was just out being IED bait for a year. And then later on, switched to another job a couple of times. And went to Afghanistan in 2009. And when I was there, I was on a French fire base working with the French Army and the Afghan Army. And since then, I'm just doing the military and law enforcement thing.
Man, that's awesome. And thank you for your service. And I got to ask, do you just like getting shot at?
Yeah, I don't know if that's exactly the right way to put it. I can tell you, getting shot at, it sort of focuses you in a way that other jobs don't. And I've never been shot at as a cop. I've had a gun pointed at me. I've never been shot at as a cop. As a soldier, I was shot at quite a few times. And it's kind of like George Washington said, that he's heard the sound of musket balls flying overhead, and there's something charming in the sound. It's not that I like getting shot at, but that you really feel like everything you're doing is important when you're getting shot at.
Mm. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure the right way to explain that.
I'm mostly just messing with you, but I was also curious. I mean, you have such a long record. I was just curious, what drives you to keep serving?
It's really just how you're built. Kind of come to this conclusion. There are people who have to be cops, who have to be soldiers. Just like there are people who have to be doctors or have to be priests. It's just something that's in your personality. If I had a job, I was making $1 billion a day, like selling copy machines or something, I would be miserable. If I had never been a cop or a soldier, I would be miserable and I would hate myself. And I know that at the end of my life, I would look back and say, I should have done this other thing. So, yeah, I don't know exactly what it is. It's like a calling, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. One of the big reasons I brought you on today is to talk about Ferguson, not from a standpoint of course, of guilt or innocent or anything like that, but as far as what you see as a law enforcement officer's perspective of what happened. And I mean, even stuff like they were making a big deal out of that the officer shot the guy 6 times. And I guess we can just go with 6 because reports were, news media reports was all over the place about what did and didn't happen. But talk to us for a minute about that from a law enforcement officer's perspective and what you've seen in all of your different stuff. What do you make out of all of that?
Well, from a police officer's perspective, when I first heard the reports, unarmed teenager was, shot 6 times and killed. And I immediately knew, okay, 1, this is going to sound really bad to a whole lot of people, and 2, the media and people, the public in general, are going to gloss over some very important details. And once I started kind of digging and waiting for more reports to surface, when I found out that Michael Brown was 6'4" and 292 pounds, that is a huge, huge deal. Because most people nowadays, especially people who work in the media, they kind of lead sheltered lives. This is something that I've written about before, that to a lot of people, when they hear the word fight, their mental image is, 2 5-year-olds slapping each other under the monkey bars. And they've never been in a real fight with an adult who is literally trying to kill them. I've been there a couple of times as a cop. And, when you realize how much damage someone can do to you with their bare hands, if they have the will, if they have the strength, then you understand that just because someone's unarmed, that does not mean they're not a threat. So first reports came out of, apparently Michael Brown, pushed the officer back into his patrol car, punched him, apparently tried to disarm him, and there was a struggle, struggle over the gun, or something happened in the vehicle and shot was fired. Okay, so what that says to me is I have a large and aggressive suspect who is physically assaulting a police officer. That's significant. There have been numerous incidents of unarmed people killing police officers. There's the one that happened 2 years ago that I cited in the blog post I wrote about it, where a 17-year-old, and I don't know exactly how big the kid was. My understanding from the picture I saw, he looked like a pretty small kid. A 17-year-old unarmed teenager punched a 29-year-old former Marine war veteran police officer, knocked him down, and when the officer fell, he hit the back of his head on the concrete, which further stunned him. And then the kid gets on top of him and starts, raining blows on his face and did so much damage that the police officer died several days later. And most of America doesn't think that's possible. Well, it's not only possible, it happens over and over, and we hear about it. We hear these little reports in the media, and then all that gets ignored. That's a long way of saying that just because someone's unarmed, that doesn't mean they're not a threat. So that was one thing. The other thing that was brought up that the officer shot Michael Brown 6 times, which you just mentioned. And there's the belief, the perception that the public has that bullets are magical things, that somebody gets shot, and just like in the movies, they get hit one time by a .22, and they go flying 50 feet through the air with blood spraying, and they hit the ground, and they're dead immediately. And that is not what happened. And just in my experience as a police officer, I've been on numerous scenes where people were shot and either not killed or not immediately disabled or not disabled at all. That's why I titled my blog post A Dose of Reality, because the reality is, this is probably the best way that I can put it. Okay, I've never shot anyone as a cop. If I ever get into a shooting, I know that as I'm firing my pistol at a bad guy, I will very likely not be able to tell if I'm hitting him, because I know that pistol bullets do not create these gigantic dramatic effects, generally speaking, and that I can hit somebody, 5, 6, 7 times and get no response at all. So I understand if I'm shooting and the guy's showing no reaction, I'm either hitting him and it's not working, or I'm missing. Either way, I need to keep shooting until I get a reaction. And what probably happened in the Ferguson incident is the officer is firing at this big, strong guy and not getting a reaction, so he keeps firing until he gets one. So those are two major points right there.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of the dash cam videos I've seen of officers where and you can kind of understand it, they end up just dumping their magazines. And it's, right. and I mean, I've even experienced that in doing Appleseed stuff or doing other training. You put the pressure on, and it's hard to even keep track of how many rounds you've fired or what.
Oh, there's no way. There's no way. That's one of the things that's sort of a joke within the tactical training world is the guys who say, well, you should count your rounds as you're shooting. Well, okay, sure. No one can do that. And the one shooting I have been involved in where I did not pull the trigger, but I had a suspect pointing a gun at me and another officer shot him. And the other officer, when he was asked, investigators asked, how many rounds did you fire? And he says, I don't know, 2 or 3. And it turned out he had fired 8. And this was a very experienced officer with more than 20 years on. This was like his second or third shooting. Anyone who thinks that I'm going to count my rounds as I'm shooting, well, go get some training because you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the guys in Delta Force can do it, but I don't think even they, under stress, are going to even try. Yeah, so it's like I said in dash cam video, you see the officers just dump their mags. That's because, that's just a natural reaction, just start shooting and keep shooting. But because generally speaking, it takes a lot of rounds to really have an effect on someone.
Yeah, and I think that's applicable information for a lot of aspects, but also definitely sheds light on for people that don't have experience with those kind of situations. Why so many bullets would be used in a case like that, unless we're talking about New York officers who shoot 70 rounds at a homeless person and hit him in the pinky toe.
I'm not commenting on that. I'm only talking about incidents where people are actually getting shot.
Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding around. But and you also made an interesting point about the 35 feet and made a pretty cool video showing as far as how long it actually takes to close the distance.
Right, and that's something else I heard is that teenage boy was 35 feet away when he was shot, and I don't know how true that is. He was 35 feet from something. My understanding right now is I think he was 35 feet from the police car. That doesn't mean he was 35 feet from Officer Wilson. But I said, okay, let's say he was 35 feet. I had like one of my friends on Facebook, a very smart guy who believes that Officer Wilson committed murder, but he made that point like, well, it would take somebody about 10 seconds to cover 35 feet. And I was like, no, it doesn't. That's why I made the video.
Oh, okay.
And I showed that, for me, a 43-year-old grandfather with man boobs and a gut and back problems, it took me 2.39 seconds. And then other people pointed out to me, you were slowing down before you got to the end. So it actually would have taken less time than that. So there are a lot of just misconceptions that the public has, including, 35 feet, that's so far. No, it isn't. And we found out a long time ago, like for instance, the 21-foot rule. Are you familiar with the 21-foot rule?
Is this the one that applies to knives?
Yes. Yeah, it applies to knives. And back in the good old days, everyone used to think like, oh, someone pulled a knife on you, just shoot them. Well, then we figured out if suspect's within 21 feet of you and pulls a knife, he'll be on you, stabbing you, before you can draw and effectively engage. Even if you engage as he's on you with the knife, you're still getting stabbed.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then actually later on in my training, we were told the original rule was 21 feet, but that's been amended to 24 because further research has showed that 24 is the actual distance. So yeah, that's something that not a lot of people think. And so people hear this, 35 feet, oh my God, that's miles. And no, it isn't. That's 2 seconds away.
Mm-hmm. And that's a lot. Because, first your brain has to even acknowledge that a threat has begun. And then you have to be able to draw and fire, which for most people, even good shooters, that's usually about a second just to draw and fire. Right.
Yeah, well, actually, a second to draw and fire. For a 4A police officer on duty holster, is a second's probably about right. Second and a half. So yeah, as it relates to the Ferguson shooting, yeah, if you got someone who's coming at you and they're 35 feet away, yeah, if it takes you, how long is it going to take you first to just recognize the threat, and then to draw, and then to make the decision to engage? By that time, the guy's going to be right on you.
I think, what other aspects of what happened speak to you as an officer?
The fact that Michael Brown committed a robbery just before he was stopped by Wilson. And this is something that's been a real serious, for me, it's like a very sore spot that I'm pretty sure that there are media outlets who are deliberately misrepresenting the crime that Brown committed. And they keep referring to it as a simple theft or shoplifting. And it absolutely was not either of those. It was a robbery. It was a felony. And that speaks to Michael Brown's mindset in a couple of ways. And first, I'll go over the difference between shoplifting and theft. So let's say that you have a pack of gum is in a convenience store. Somebody walks in, looks around, doesn't see anyone looking, so he grabs a pack of gum, puts it in his pocket, and he walks out. That's shoplifting. Okay, he stole a 50-cent pack of gum. If they call the police show up and they catch the guy with the gum in his pocket, then what the police officer will do in most places is write the guy a ticket for misdemeanor theft. Municipal level here in Texas, it would be Class C theft. Write him a ticket. You've got to show up in court for this Class C theft. It's the same level of offense as a traffic ticket, basically. Okay. Now, say the very same pack of gum, you go in the convenience store, you buy it, you go walking out down the sidewalk, and a guy walks up to you, grabs you by the throat, says, "Give me that pack of gum that's in your pocket or I'm going to beat you to death." So you give him the pack of gum and he walks away. That's a robbery. The important thing here isn't the value of the pack of gum, and you always hear this, people referring to that Brown was killed over stealing a $50 pack of cigars. No, he wasn't. The amount that was stolen is not what determines whether or not it's a robbery. It's the force use. So theft plus force equals robbery. Robbery is a violent crime. Robbery is very often turned into murders. In this case, where Brown didn't have a weapon, but you have a lot of strong-arm robberies where guys get the hell beaten out of them for no reason.
Mm.
So robbery is a very violent offense. This leads into another aspect of the Ferguson shooting, is whether or not Officer Wilson knew that Brown had committed the robbery. There's a lot of people making a big deal out of the fact that the chief of Ferguson said when Wilson stopped him, he did not know about the robbery. He stopped stopped Brown and his friend Johnson just for walking the street. Okay, that's fine. Now, apparently what happened, though, is that after he stopped them for that, then he realized, oh, wait a minute, these are the suspects in this robbery, or it may not even been reported as robbery. It was reported maybe as a simple theft or something like that. So this is where it comes into, Brown's mindset comes into play again. Even if Wilson had no idea that Brown had done anything wrong, Brown did. Chances are he knew, I just committed a crime that could possibly get me thrown into jail for a long time. He could go to prison for robbery. So he would likely react different to the police officer stopping him than somebody who hadn't done anything wrong. And the best way I can describe this to you, okay, imagine a police officer gets a call about loud music at an apartment. Okay, no big deal. We get those calls all the time. Well, he shows up to the apartment, knocks on the door, and the only thing the officer's thinking is, I'm going to tell this guy to turn the music down and I'm going to leave. Mm-hmm. Well, if the guy inside is cutting up the body of the young woman he just kidnapped and murdered, how's the guy in the apartment going to react to the police officer?
Yeah, he's reacting based on what he knows he's doing.
Exactly. Okay. So Michael Brown is, I think, and this is all conjecture on my part, okay, but Michael Brown, I think, is reacting to the officer based on what Michael Brown knows he just did, not what the officer knows he just did. So you take that as another very important factor in this case. You have a guy who just committed a robbery, which is a violent felony. You have, this suspect is 6'4" and almost 300 pounds. He's already shown he's aggressive. He's physically aggressive. He apparently initiates an assault against the officer. And then, well, from here we don't know what happens. But there are many reasons that it could, or I guess there are many possibilities that it could have been a justified shooting based on, things that we talked about.
And I think to kind of segue off into the police's response to the civil unrest, not whether or not it was justified, but a topic that came up a lot in the news, which was the militarization of the police. My personal thing, and I had a friend that we were sitting around talking about it a couple weeks ago, and I kind of looked at it as not the bigger thing going on here with open carry, but as far as most people's aversion to open carry is that now you see it, and so it's really, whereas before you didn't, and so now it's in your focus and in your consciousness, and you're having to think about it, and for at least in Texas, people aren't used to that, so it's scary. So to me, it's like, okay, that's an issue of optics. That's not a legitimate thing going on. And I think when I look at the militarization, and I know this is going to kind of shock some people in the audience, which is that personally, I look at it, and I'm like, I think a lot of it is silly, but just the pure, most of it just looks like optics to me. Like, okay, you look like a fool because you're running around in whatever major metro wearing full camo and you got a shemagh on and all this other stuff, when it's just like, okay, it looks like you've been playing too much Call of Duty. But at the same time, I also do kind of get that and he made this point, which was, that there's a mentality that goes along with that. And I thought, yeah, that can be true. But in the same way, he and I both carry a gun every day as CHL holders. Just because I carry a gun doesn't mean I want to go shoot somebody or run around like I've been playing too much Call of Duty. Oddly enough, the more training I get, I find the less interested in ever having to deploy that weapon I am, unless it's airsoft and we're shooting at James Gray. But that's a different story for a different day. But what is it really? I mean, from your perspective, is it just optics, or is there more to it than that?
I think there's more to it than just optics. When I first started back in '94, law enforcement was growing up a lot and adapting to reality better than we had before. Things like real defensive tactic training that was based on actual incidents rather than kind of canned crap that people have been taught for years. The fact that we went to using retention holsters, whereas before you had decades of incidents of officers getting disarmed and killed, and you still had police officers saying, well, I want to carry this speed draw holster with no retention system at all because I want to be able to outdraw a bad guy. And we almost never have to outdraw someone. We were finally adapting to the realities of the threats we were facing. At this time, we were also getting widespread use of body armor. What happened after 9/11 is you had another big push for, preparing for reality. And that's where we really started getting better training, like the active shooter courses that police officers nationwide started going to, where we're using simunitions rather than just, pointing fake guns at each other and saying bang, bang, and having a referee say, oh, well, this guy got hit. With the sim rounds, and if you use airsoft, it's very similar. But with the sim rounds, that is the most realistic level of training that we can get short of actually shooting each other. When all this stuff started, we realized that, okay, you've got guys who are downrange in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they are learning some very valuable lessons about the realities of combat, and they're sending back these lessons. Like, now you have a whole lot of police officers carrying tourniquets, whereas before it was, we had this very stupid mentality, both in the military and law enforcement, that you only put on a tourniquet if the person's within a second of dying, because as soon as you put it on, 10 seconds later, they're going to die from it. Mm-hmm. And that's a load of crap. Okay, we've learned that that's absolutely wrong. And we've taken to heart some very valuable lessons. When we first started implementing those lessons into law enforcement, we looked at the war situation, we looked at law enforcement, and we said, okay, the physics are the same whether you're a soldier getting shot at in combat or you're a police officer getting shot at on the street. So, what's going to stop a bullet overseas is the same thing that's going to stop a bullet here. And we made some very important changes to law enforcement training based on that. The problem is we didn't stop at just the stuff that makes sense. and we did have, I don't know what the number is, I couldn't really guess on percentages, but we did have a sizable number of officers in the United States who didn't just want to adopt the practical lessons, to implement the practical, new tactics and stuff, but to adopt the look and adopt the mentality of soldiers overseas, which is why all of a sudden you've got police officers pretty much everywhere, on any of the tactical teams wearing desert boots. And what the hell is the reason to wear desert boots on duty in a city in the United States? What reason is there for police officers to be wearing Marine Corps pattern camo on duty in the United States, or a shamag? And a shamag is, wearing it around your neck is really kind of a pain in the ass. I never like to do it. I have a shamag that I've had for a long time. I took it with me to Iraq. I took it with me to Afghanistan, but it was really just to cover my head completely in very specific situations. Like when I was in Afghanistan, if I needed to get on certain kind of communication device that had lights and it was nighttime, I would cover my head and the commo device with the shamag so I could talk and not put out any light. But I didn't wear it around my neck all the time. So if I see a police officer with a shamag in the United States, and I've never seen anyone personally, I've just seen pictures of them, it's astounding to me. Like, why the hell would you do that? And the only reason I can come up with is they want to look like soldiers. So I think, like to your point, that you think it's just optics, I think some of it is just optics. But I also think there's a real problem with police officers thinking, I want to look like a soldier.
And that kind of switching the mentality for them from being, say, a peace officer, somebody there to protect and serve, shifting it to more of viewing everyone that's not an officer as an enemy combatant. Is that kind of where you're going with that?
I don't know, because I don't think that the average officer, even the guys who are all dressed up, I don't think that the average officer views everyone as a bad guy. I certainly haven't seen that in my career, with being in 3 different police departments and the United Nations mission. I haven't met officers who say like, oh, they're all the enemy and the only people you can trust are other cops. What I have seen are guys who becoming more and more risk averse. That, we have to have the armor, we have to have the weapons, we have to adopt the military tactics because, we need to go home at the end of the shift. Well, this is going to sound kind of strange, I guess, to most cops, but the most important thing is not that we go home at the end of the shift. The most important thing is that we do our jobs. And one of the things that sucks about being a cop, but we all knew it when we got the job, is you may have to die in order to carry out your job. And just like with being a soldier, the end goal is not just to be alive. It's to serve honorably and do your job. And sometimes it's better that you take the risk of dying than that you make sure you're safe while the people you're supposed to protect aren't.
Yeah, that's been my big issue with the no-knock warrants that have kind of cropped up over the last few years with SWAT teams and stuff. It's like, well, we might, we could get shot at. And it's like, yeah, and you can also storm in on a family of 5 and shoot their kid, shoot the dog for no reason because you got the address wrong and you didn't knock because, well, you wanted to be safe. And that kind of, that's a little bit of a separate topic. But yeah, no, I get what you mean. So going beyond optics and everything else, as far as the mentality, there's not necessarily an adversarial mentality, but just wrong mentality for the job, as far as the difference between police and law enforcement.
Well, it's the wrong mentality for the job in general. The whole warrior mentality, it's exactly what you need in some very bad situations, like if you look at the North Hollywood shootout. You look at the Miami FBI shootout. You look at the attack on school in Beslan. If we're faced with that kind of situation where you got guys who are armed with fully automatic weapons, guys who are dedicated murderers that are out trying to kill as many people as possible, then yes. Then I want the guys who are all geared up in MRAPs with, M4 carbines and snipers and all that stuff. I want all those guys on the scene because that's what you need for that kind of a situation. But it becomes a problem where it gets applied to law enforcement in general, to your job policing the public in general. We don't need all that stuff for the average, everyday crimes that we deal with. For instance, as a cop, I've never been in an MRAP. You know, I've never been on the street in camouflage clothes, yet I've somehow managed to respond to a bunch of murders. Personally, caught one or two murders, or helped catch murderers. I've caught armed robbers. You know, all of us have. All of us on the street, work patrol, and anywhere where there's any amount of crime, we're doing these things daily, and we don't need all of that extra equipment to do it. So for me, the issue becomes that we don't want that soldier, warrior, you know, up-armored mentality for all law enforcement functions. We only want it for the few situations where it's really needed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that definitely speaks to kind of the same thing in the prepper community, where you do see people that go overboard, and it's like they're wearing camouflage all the time, or they're doing whatever, and so you're kind of like, okay, that's unnecessary. You know, you're kind of living in a state, too high of a state of ready when it's not necessary and called for, and in a lot of ways causing yourself stress and grief that unnecessarily, or focusing on a mentality that's just not necessary and needed in that moment. Yeah, sure, zombies rise tomorrow, you know, kid up, go crazy, have a good time, whatever. But as far as like day to day, you know, living and breathing as if it's going to happen every second it's just totally unnecessary and unproductive in a lot of ways, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree. There's a fine line between being ready and trying to provoke the situation that you're ready for.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. And you put out something interesting recently that, and I think it was really good, and I didn't get a chance to really read it all the way through, I'll admit that, but as far as healing the divide between and healing the mistrust between officers and the public.
Yeah, after I wrote the Ferguson essay, the post on Ferguson, and in case anyone cares to look, my website is www.chrishernandezauthor.com, and it's all one word. And I wrote the blog post called "A Dose of Reality for Ferguson, Missouri." And then, in that post, I got such a gigantic response back to it, where it's had about 500,000 hits. You know, I hadn't written anything that had been that successful, or got almost 150,000 hits in one day, and shared on actually tens of thousands of websites. And, you know, I've got hundreds of comments on my blog, and comments to the writing on other blogs and all that stuff. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't come across as a guy who says, well, you know, the police are always right, and if you don't like what we do, then you just don't understand, you should shut your mouth. Because that's not the case. So I was looking at the Michael Brown shooting and saying, look, there is a real possibility that Wilson was 100% justified in the shooting. But I understand why people are very upset about law enforcement seeming to be, I don't know what the right term is, out of control, but law enforcement seems to be overstepping its boundaries quite often. And, you know, we've got all these videos now of officers doing stupid stuff they're not supposed to do. You have things that are officially sanctioned, like you just mentioned, all the no-knock raids. Mm. And one statistic that I've seen was that in the 1980s, like in 1983, there were roughly 1,000 no-knock warrants nationwide. And in 2010, there were over 50,000. So if that's true, yeah, that's a problem. And I think we as police officers, there are things that we can do to help heal that rift, to help repair the trust, rebuild the trust between us and the public. And the number one thing, like we've already talked about, is the military stuff. Let's tone down on the military stuff. You know, we can still look like regular old cops and be professional and be well-trained and be prepared. We don't have to be out in desert boots and camouflage and calling them rap out whenever. And we definitely don't need wearing freaking shamods. But that's one thing we can do. Another thing is we need to adopt, embrace the use of cameras. And there are still a lot of police officers who don't like having cameras on their cars. There are officers who don't like having body cameras on. And I understand why. Because very often cameras don't show everything that happened. And when the video gets released, typically only the most inflammatory part will be shared with the public by most media outlets.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that officers, some of them cringe at the use of cameras, but I think that's one of those things that we have to decide, hey, whether we like it or not, we need to embrace this, because this is going to show the public this is the reason why we do what we do. These are the situations we're facing. Those two things, and then I guess this is probably actually the biggest thing that we can do is end the war on drugs, which is something we obviously can't do on our own, but we can show our support politically for at least the decriminalization of marijuana. And it took me a long time to get to this point. I've never used any kind of illegal drug. I've never smoked marijuana. I've never even drank a beer. And for a long time, I thought, anyone who's smoking pot, that's a bad guy. And, we need to make these arrests. And I put a lot of people in jail for drugs and put them marijuana. And now I look back and realize that was really stupid. It's counterproductive and it's hypocritical. Because you have pretty much every cop likes to go home and have a few beers or hang out at the bar and have a few beers and all that stuff. But what's the difference between that and smoking a joint? And I haven't figured it out yet. No, I have not seen any reason to believe that smoking marijuana is so horrible we need to throw people in jail for it. And we definitely don't need to no-knock raid their houses because, this guy's got a bag of weed in his closet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one still puzzles me. Depending on which documentary on the topic you watch, you can go back and see a history of reasons that has nothing to do with public health or anything else. And I think I've yet to see a medical study that said anything other than alcohol is actually much more harmful for you than, say, marijuana. The other harder drugs, I look at it as like this, okay, that's some of the harder drugs, you may be doing physical harm to yourself, but the crime you're committing is against yourself. And is that a crime? Is that just self-destructive, or is that really a crime? Is the crime committed when you used the drugs, or is the crime committed at the point where you've developed such a habit and now you're going to go knock over a liquor store or rob someone and infringe on someone else's liberty to, where is the crime really being committed? Where is someone else actually being harmed? My estimation, that's where the crime is. It's like, okay, you became a meth head. That sucks for you. That's the life you chose. Okay. But to me, it's like you didn't commit the crime until you went out and hurt or infringed on someone else's liberties to facilitate your meth habit or crack habit or whatever it is. But yeah, the pot thing is just bizarre to me. But yeah,
I would definitely agree with that.
There actually is something I wanted to go back to real quick, as far as, and I think it's both a lesson of perspective on what happened in Ferguson, but it's also a lesson, I think, for people in general in self-defense situations where we talked about, or it was a big thing in the media, lethal versus non-lethal tools, we'll call them, in that instance where all these people were like, he should have tased him or he should have maced him and all this other stuff. As an officer's perspective, right. what is your take on that?
Intermediate weapons are, I wouldn't say they're overrated, but they are not a baton is not the magic lightsaber that people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And pepper spray is great most of the time. And if people really knew through experience how often they were ineffective, they would understand why you don't automatically go to an intermediate weapon when you think someone's trying to kill you.
Mm.
So, in my personal experience, I have hit two guys with an ASP baton. And when I went through training, I've been through two police academies, and when I went through the ASP training in the first academy, it was basically that, once you pull out this steel baton and you extend it, just extending it is going to scare most suspects into giving up. And then when you hit them the first time, they're going to fall to their knees and, beg Jesus for forgiveness, and they're going to change their lives. And basically, after they get out of jail, they're going to become priests. And then I actually hit somebody with one in a situation where I got a call to a gas station about a guy acting crazy. And this guy is like, he was probably 6'2", 6'3", and wiry and high on I don't know what. But he's running around screaming at customers, chasing them and stuff like that. And when I pull up, he comes at me screaming and stops near the front of my car and is just furious for, I have no idea what reason. And another officer pulled up, and when we tried to grab him, he started swinging. The other officer pepper sprayed him and got it in his eyes. So the guy's wiping his eyes, and we tried to grab this suspect. And I was really lucky that the suspect was left-handed, and I was on his right side. And he punched the other officer. He punched him in the temple and almost knocked him out. And then I pulled out my baton, and we had this really interesting fight where I'm backpedaling through this parking lot, swinging my baton, repeatedly hitting the guy in the arms. I hit him in the leg once, which made him stumble. That was the only one that had any real effect. I think I hit him in the torso. I'm pretty sure I hit him in the knee. I hit him all over the place as I'm running backwards through the parking lot, and he's swinging at me. And then I finally run into a parked car, and the guy punched me. A couple of interesting things happened then. The guy whose car I ran into yelled at me not to scratch his car and then drove away. But we wind up on the ground, rolling around. The other officer finally wakes up, and he jumps into the fight. And, we pepper sprayed the guy again. I wanted to hit him with the baton again. He actually got a hold of the baton during the fight and started to swing at me. And it didn't really have an effect on him until everything was over. After he gave up, then now he can't walk. He's dragging his leg around. But he was so high at the time and so charged up on adrenaline, it just didn't do anything. And I had another incident where a guy high on PCP driving a stolen car, and we had a pursuit, and he bailed out on foot. And when I finally caught up to him, I wound up pepper spraying him and then hitting him with a baton several times. I don't know how I hit him in the foot, but I hit him in the foot, and I actually broke his foot. And then he got a hold of my pepper spray and tried to spray me, and then wound up running about another 4 blocks down the street on a broken foot.
Holy crap.
Yeah, and these intermediate weapons very often don't work. What I would say with the baton is that in a lot of cases, they just won't have an effect at all. With pepper spray works on everyone, but it doesn't work on everyone right away. So you have people, I've seen guys take shots like straight into the eyes. And the one guy that I saw 2 officers spraying him. And they're like spraying him right in the eyes. And his reaction was, "Will you quit spraying that crap on my face?" And then he keeps fighting. And a few minutes later, we have him handcuffed. And by the time we get back to the station, now he's crying and rolling around. But when they were spraying him, nothing. So these things don't always work. And then with tasers, I've only heard of one case. I know there are more, but I've heard from an officer who did it. I've heard of one case where a suspect took both darts, good spread, good shock, and the guy was so high, he just grabbed the darts, pulled them out, and kept coming towards the officers. But what happens in a lot of cases with the taser is both darts have to hit. When you shoot the taser, 2 darts come out of different angles. Both of them have to hit. They've got to hit the skin, and they have to be far enough apart to get a good circuit. Okay? So you have situations, especially in the winter, where officers will shoot the taser and one or both darts will get hung up on clothing, get hung up on like a leather jacket or something like that. And so the taser is ineffective. What we've learned in law enforcement is if you have a suspect who you think is a lethal threat, like you got a guy with a knife, or you got, a guy who's 6'4" and 300 pounds, and, he's high and he's saying, "I'm going to kill you," and you're going to tase this guy, you need to have one officer with the taser and a second officer there providing lethal coverage, standing there with his pistol out in case the taser doesn't work. So these weapons are not, I keep using this term over and over, but they're not magic. They're not, these amazing, whatever you want to call them. It's not sorcery that's always going to work on a bad guy. They're going to work if the conditions are right. And in a situation where, I got somebody coming at me, he's 35 feet away, I really think this guy's going to kill me, I'm not pulling pepper spray or a taser. I'm pulling my weapon.
That makes perfect sense. When you're in a life or death situation, it's like, let's not stop and try to figure out what is the kindest, gentlest way I can deal with this situation. It's let me, not die.
Yeah, preferably.
Yeah. And I think as far as, I think a lot of people do see all these other things as lightsabers, as you put a few minutes ago. And I think another aspect it is, one of the things that kind of gave me a moment for pause was when I was watching and they were talking about it. And it's like, well, you know, you've got this guy, regardless of his size, you know, you have a person attacking an officer. They're in extremely close contact with one another. You know, at that point, does the officer or person using pepper spray run as big of a risk blinding themselves as they do blinding the person they're trying to get off of them?
With pepper spray, you're probably not going to blind yourself, but what you'll have is, if you're in very close quarters and you spray someone, and I've done this before, when you spray them, there's always a splatter. And that's if it's extreme. If it's a fog, obviously it's a fog. And now you have, there's also a foam, which was designed specifically to prevent that splatter or have everyone in the room get fogged. But I've never actually seen anyone use foam. But yeah, there's the effect of, you spray somebody in the face, it splatters, and you breathe it in. So sometimes the best outcome you can come up with is, he's blind and I'm choking to death and I'm trying to get him handcuffed. When you have multiple officers, I was actually sprayed directly in the eyes by my field training officer, where I had a suspect and I had one cuff on him, and he's struggling trying not to get cuffed, and I was on one side of him and my field trainer was on the other side. My field trainer yells, "Hey," and both me and the suspect, like, you know, dumbasses, turn and look. And my field trainer sprayed the suspect, who jerked his head out of the way, and my field trainer sprayed me right directly in my left eye.
Oh, crap.
And it's like getting stabbed in the brain with a nice stick. It was horrible. You know, and I managed to hold on to the handcuffs. And then I almost handcuffed the suspect to my field trainer's wrist. And then, you know, and I pretended I was okay as he drove me back to the station. By the time we got back to the station, I could open my eyes a little bit. And, you know, I was telling everyone, like, yeah, I'm fine. So you go to the bathroom, rinse my eyes out. And I got to the bathroom, and I made sure no one else was in there, and I cried like a little frightened girl. It was horrible. But yeah, that happens when you're doing the close quarters thing. You kind of there's sort of an understanding among patrol officers, like, if you're in a room, don't use pepper spray because everyone's going to get fogged. And you had a lot of officers who got cussed out by their coworkers for using pepper spray in close quarter situations. I know of one officer, I mean, I don't know if this really has a lot of bearing on this, but I think it's just a funny story. One officer that was chasing a very large suspect, and it was a small officer, like about my size, 5'7", and 130 pounds or so at the time. And the officer jumps on the suspect's back to tackle him. Well, the suspect just keeps running. So this officer gets his pepper spray and he sticks it in front of the suspect's face and goes to spray, and the suspect jerks his head out of the way, and the officer sprays himself in the eyes. So the officer is on the suspect's back, blind, on the radio screaming, "I'm on this guy's back, I'm blind, I don't know where I am," calling for help. So, yeah, weird things can happen with pepper spray at close quarters.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Oh, man, it definitely doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
No, it kind of sucks. Getting sprayed with pepper spray kind of sucks. And I've sprayed other officers. You know, that's just something that happens to all of us. If you use spray, you know, you're in enough situations that you're going to spray someone else, and someone else is going to spray you.
That's horrible. Oh, man. You know, one of the other things that we were talking about as far as like a super heightened state of readiness, I'm curious your take on this. And I know you've recently written on the topic about ISIS. What are your thoughts on this whole situation, both as a larger issue and just as a local issue, and it being something people, at least the normal everyday person, has to be concerned with? I
would say that the worry we have here is not of a gigantic coordinated attack. The worry we have here is of the lone wolf. And we already had it here a couple of times before anyone heard the term ISIS, or at least one of them before anyone heard the term ISIS, where you had the suspect in Arkansas who drove up to a Army recruiting station and shot two soldiers that were outside, killed one of them. Mm-hmm. And that guy, he was carrying out his attack for his own. we had the other guy recently, I can't remember his name, the guy that killed 4 people. 3 of them were, if I understand correctly, 3 of them were homosexual men who he had tricked, pretending that it was like a blind date and then wound up killing them. And the last was just a random teenager. And then when he was caught, said, I was doing this as part of jihad. So I think what we're going to have here is we're going to have more of those lone wolf type attacks. And I should point out here, I'm not an expert on terrorism. I'm not an expert on ISIS. I'm just telling you my gut feeling based on, my experience as a police officer and as a soldier.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be very difficult for a terrorist cell to pull off a major attack inside the United States again. But it's not impossible. It's probably not even difficult for the lone wolves to go out and just conduct random shooting attacks. So I think that's where we really need to be vigilant about, seeing that one guy in the mall or in the grocery store who just doesn't look right, wearing clothing that's like, why is this guy wearing a trench coat in August in Houston? Why is he looking around everywhere? Why did he look nervous? Those are things that we need to be vigilant for. The other stuff, if someone's going to blow up a bomb, blow up a car bomb, take a place, in Alamo Plaza in San Antonio or something like that, well, what are the chances that the average person is going to realize, hey, that's a car bomb? In Oklahoma City, you had, what's his face? I can't remember, I forgot his name. The Oklahoma City bomber.
Timothy McVeigh,
actually, that guy actually ran from the vehicle. He left it parked in the street in front of the building and then ran from it, which should have been a clue. But nobody really picked up on what that meant. The failed New York Times car bomber, well, he didn't build the bombs right, and so there was smoke coming from the vehicle. Someone looked inside and said, hey, there's a bunch of cocaine tanks. So, and they recognized what that was. But if someone's going to carry out that kind of an attack with any level of proficiency, we're not going to know. And there's only so much you can prepare for. If I'm carrying a gun, I'm going to get in training, I'm being vigilant. I can do something if, a guy pulls out an AK in the mall and starts shooting. I can do something. It may not work, but I can do something. Well, if somebody brings a 500-pound car bomb full of Ebola and detonates it out in a public area, well, I can only do so much about that myself. Now, I can look for weird signs that the whole thing that the federal government was pushing about see something, say something. That actually makes a whole lot of sense. Kind of to give a more brief answer to your question, what I see is lone wolf attacks, and if it's something bigger than lone wolf attacks, well, you as an individual, there's not a whole lot you can do. Doesn't mean you're helpless or defenseless, but there's not a whole lot we can do about an attack that gets carried out the right way.
Yeah, that's funny. A friend and trainer of mine that was it's former Secret Service and did presidential detail. I mean, he said the same thing. I mean, it was in a slightly different context, but it was a lot of that. It's like, look, and I think it was basically if somebody wants you dead, and they know they have any clue as to what they're doing, you're going to be dead. Mm-hmm. And I think that a very similar thing.
And that's the thing. It just sucks. It's one of those realities that just sucks. And I kind of laugh whenever I hear somebody say, if anyone tries anything on me, I guarantee I'm going to pull my pistol and kill him dead, blah, blah. Yeah, sure. Yes, we train. Yes, we stay armed and we stay vigilant. It doesn't mean you're always going to win. And, sorry, man, if you're asleep in bed and someone drops an anvil on your head, you're going to lose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, if you happen to pick that day to walk into, whatever mall, the Dallas Mall, and you're walking into Macy's and right there is a delivery truck that suddenly explodes and takes out half the building, you're going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And, those people who say, I'm so well prepared, I'll never lose. Yeah, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Go get some more training.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and speaking of training, and speaking to the point you're making, I think it was one of the interesting things, especially if you've never been in any situations like that. One of the things that struck me funny when we were doing our force on force stuff with James, and it was one of the things my co-host also after we all did the class was, if you've never really done force and force or had to draw your pistol in the moment, what I found was interesting was I didn't actually know when I was going to draw my weapon and use it in the situation. It was just kind of about a second after it was already drawn and after I'd already been shooting at James and started to move on to the other people in the scenario. It wasn't until I was already on to the other people that I even realized what I was doing.
Yeah, that's something that happened. You hear it a lot from people who have had a lot of training, and I've experienced it myself, where, for instance, in the shooting that I was involved in, where I knocked on a door of an apartment, and guy inside sticks a pistol into the window, and I heard the weapon hitting the window, didn't know that's what it was, and I leaned out and I'm looking down the barrel of the pistol. And I jumped out of the way, got up like I was trying to melt into the paint on the wall, and I'm all of a sudden looking back at the window down the sights of my weapon and didn't even realize I had drawn. And you hear that from a lot of people with a lot of training when they've been in some very stressful situations. Like, I didn't know that I was doing this until I already done it, or I've had in the police academy, second police academy I went through a very, very difficult training exercise where you have to do all this very difficult physical stuff, and you're all worn out, and you get in a ring with an instructor who beats the crap out of you and then tries to take your weapon. And when I finally got floored and the instructor got on top of me and started trying to disarm me, I did not realize I did this, but instructors and other cadets told me that I actually rolled over onto my weapon and curled up into a ball, and I have no recollection at all of doing that. So, yeah, that's an indication of good training, that you react before you realize you're reacting. Not necessarily the case if you're talking about actually shooting, but because you don't want to shoot without realizing that you're shooting.
Yeah.
But to draw, to take get into a defensive posture, react, just immediately seek cover or concealment or something like that. That's an indication of good training. So
on a lighter note, you have another passion beyond this, and I mean they do tie together. Tell us about your writing.
Well, I've written a couple of novels. I've actually written 3. I've published 2. First one is titled Proof of Our Resolve, and it is about a Texas National Guard infantry platoon in Afghanistan. And it's based on my experiences there. There are obviously very significant changes to the story, but I wrote it just as sort of, one, to just get a whole lot of stuff off my chest, which it was just kind of a crappy reason to write a book sometimes. But I wrote it to get some stuff off my chest and to try to give an indication to the public of, hey, this is what the war is really like. I hear reports about the war on the news, and people are saying, oh, such and such guy was killed on the front lines of Afghanistan. And it occurs to me that people they think they're the front line, like this is World War II, and don't realize just how complicated and convoluted and gray and unclear the whole thing is. So I wrote Proof of Our Resolve to sort of show that reality. And then I published another novel titled Lyman Valley, which follows the same main character. He's back in Texas after Afghanistan and still in the National Guard. And there is a limited cartel incursion on the Texas border. And the Texas National Guard is called to respond. And it turns into a horrible, disgusting, small-scale war on the Texas border, on one part of the Texas border. And that one was I just came up with the idea that, hey, I think this would be a really crappy situation for us to face. I think I need to start writing this. So far, getting a very positive response. I have a lot of good reviews, and actually, something I was thinking about earlier, one person who left a review on Amazon said, I would really like to hear some more about this, but from a prepper perspective. Like, what's the likelihood of something like this actually happening, and how we prepare for it?
Mm-hmm. So are you gonna write that book too, or are you just gonna blog about that?
Well, I don't know, because I'm not a prepper.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know exactly what would be the things to write about. I think maybe a better thing would be for a prepper to ask me the questions for whatever is important, for being a prepper for survivalist purposes. And I will answer to help as much as I can, but I really don't know what would be the right thing to say, other than obviously, if you're living in a town that gets invaded by bad guys, please try to get the hell out of there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we'll have to turn that into a whole nother show where we have listeners submit questions and then you get on and answer it.
I'm all for it anytime.
Awesome. So you had Proof of Our Resolve, and you also had Line in the Valley. What? And I know just personally, you have another book cooking that you can't release for a while. What got you into writing?
I don't know. If you figure it out, tell me.
Sick,
I don't have
twisted, self mutilation. I think is usually the road of most writing.
Yeah, that's probably, well, now that I've been in it, the fact that I stay in it, it's trying to get a book published is such a painful, soul-killing exercise.
Uh-huh.
But the way it started out is, I was in Afghanistan in 2009, and I just had an idea that, hey, I think this would be kind of a cool story. And it was about a major terrorist attack that takes place in Houston, but not the kind of attack most people think when they think of terrorism. So I came up with the idea, came home on leave, and discussed it with a few people, including my father. My father's a major supporter of my writing. And my dad tells me, hey, you really should start writing this. So in the plane on the way back to Afghanistan, I started writing it. And then I got back, and I was kind of busy when I was in Afghanistan. So I only wrote about 30 pages. And then I came back home and had a couple of months of leave built up, and wound up writing this very long, it would have been like a 700-page novel in less than 2 months.
Wow.
And of course, because I had more will to write than intelligence about writing, I made every mistake that any writer makes. I everything from using too many adverbs to adding way too much unnecessary crap that distracted from the main plot, to just being too wordy and trying to prove a point where points need to be made. I made a whole lot of dumb mistakes. It took me a while to realize I made all these dumb mistakes. So I went back and rewrote. I actually split it into 2 books. The first book wound up being Proof of Our Resolve, because the main character is an Afghanistan veteran. So I pulled it out and made that an independent book. And then I got so passionate about the whole thing that I just had to keep writing the storyline. And then Line in the Valley, which is actually part 3 of the series. And I've got plans for at least 2 more in that same series. But as far as why I have to write, I don't know. I feel compelled to do it. And I also, now I've decided that that's my life goal, is just to be a full-time writer. And if I can support my family off of writing, if I can just be at home with my wife and kids after spending all these years away and going to war and night shift and all this stuff, if I can just stay home and write, I will be the happiest ex-soldier, ex-copy ever met in your life.
Well, that's awesome, man. I hope that, I really do hope that happens for you. And you've also been blogging a lot. And obviously your blog has been and your writing has been getting a lot of attention. What drives you to share those great thoughts?
As it turns out, when I first started blogging, my intent was just to write like true war stories and true cop stories. Just because I thought those are interesting, and most of what people know about police, what they think they know, comes from TV and movies, and like we've seen happen with Ferguson. Most of what people know about war comes from TV and movies, and we've also got probably like a division strength of military fakers in the United States who are spreading all kinds of stupid lies about the military, and people buy it.
Mm.
So initially I was just going to tell true stories. And then actually after the Sandy Hook shooting, after the Sandy Hook massacre, I wrote a blog post about the importance of the Second Amendment and why we need to embrace the Second Amendment rather than restrict it, because I believe that the more good people you have armed out in public, the less likelihood you have of mass shootings. There's going to be fewer than the ones that happen, will be less severe if you have people on the scene ready to take action. So I started writing about that, and that actually got a lot more attention than the war stories and cop stories. So I started writing more opinion stuff. And what I found out is there really are not many, or maybe there's none. There aren't people who are just, a regular guy who's been a cop for a long time and who went to war a couple of times, talking about the realities of their experience.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't have. And I think what happens with law enforcement is a lot of the guys who write law enforcement stuff are writing it for other cops. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's not written in a way that appeals to the average reader. And maybe it's kind of like if you ever see a police officer on the stand testifying, and he's saying something like, the alleged suspect then allegedly went northeast by 361 degrees and attempted to enter the domicile of such and such. And whenever I hear something like that, I always think, dude, just say the friggin' suspect went and tried to kick the door in. That's the level that I think we need to communicate with people on.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been writing the blog where I'm trying to kind of just be Chris talking to whoever wants to listen. But hey man, this is the reality that I've experienced. And apparently a lot of people want to hear about it. And one of the things that I thought that I've been very honored by is this last post about Ferguson. I have seen where it's been reposted on other forums, on other blogs, and I've had people who completely disagree with me, politically, who disagree with me about law enforcement practices, guys who say, hey, Officer Wilson committed murder and that's the end of it. And then they say, that was a really interesting article and I learned a lot. And, if I have that kind of reaction, because I'm, politically I'm extremely independent, although I tend to lean conservative. I absolutely hate Hillary Clinton's guts. I should put that out there. But if somebody who disagrees with me on pretty much everything that I do will still say, but I still like that writing and I learned something, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm kind of maybe filling an opening, filling a gap that's been there where you haven't had just the regular guy who's been a combat soldier and a cop who can just sit down and talk to people and say, hey man, this is something I think you should know. So, the blog's been successful in that regard, I think, and hopefully it'll be successful.
Well, awesome, man. And tell us your website again so that listeners can connect with you.
It is www.chrishernandezauthor.com. And it's all one word, no spaces, no underscores or anything like that. And it's Hernandez with a Z at the end and an H at the beginning, because a whole lot of people will hear that and think it's Fernandez. But it's Hernandez. It's pretty cool now. You can do a search for Chris Hernandez author on Google. A whole lot of the articles I've written pop up. I also write for ReachBangClear.com, Iron Mike magazine, and I've contributed to a couple of other websites.
Awesome, man. Well, we'll definitely be sure to put links to your site and your books and everything in the show notes so that people can, in case they didn't hear it or something, and for posterity's sake, people can go back and click through and check out all your great stuff.
All right, fantastic. I appreciate that. Hopefully your readers find it interesting.
I'm sure they will, man. Well, Chris, man, I sure appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your knowledge on what has turned into a wide range of topics today. And hopefully, we'll have you back soon. We'll get some listener participation and have them submit some questions on the prepper stuff that we mentioned earlier. And I'm looking forward to having you on again sometime soon.
I've enjoyed it, man. One really cool thing is being interviewed and not having someone tell me, well, look, this needs to be exactly 48 seconds. That's all the time we have, So I've enjoyed the opportunity to talk about the wide range of topics, and I'd be happy to be back.
Awesome, man. Thanks again, and thank you again for your service.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, everybody, the challenge has been thrown down. Submit your questions in the comments about surviving a hostile incursion. Then we'll get Chris back on to answer your questions and, of course, have some fun with it. Now, as most of you know, this is the Season 4 premiere, and some of you may be expecting some updates on the farm and the goings-on around here while we were on break. There's some good news, some bad news, a country song of a story to tell, and shenanigans coming next episode. Plus, find out how Jonathan and Jason have accepted the ultimate survival challenge, revealed next episode for your listening pleasure. Till then, Stay safe and sound.